Equations of a circle. Let's focus on this circle diagram and let's label a couple key parts. So this segment here starts at what we call the center. And I'm abbreviating the center ordered pair with h comma k. So suppose that's at 2 comma 3. Your 2, or h would be your 2 value, k would be your 3 value. This segment itself is called the radius. And this point right here is a point on the circle. So the equation of a circle is formed using this information. So an equation of a circle with a center at h comma k and a radius of r is going to be x minus h in parentheses squared plus y minus k in parentheses squared, and this is going to be equal to the radius squared. So a couple things I want everyone to notice is that standard form is with subtraction, so be very careful of that. It's not the first time we're seeing it, but definitely something we need to pay attention to. And that the center of the circle is used throughout this formula. We have our h value here, we have our k value here. We also see that this is equivalent to the radius, and it's the radius squared. So r stands for the radius, and of course you square that for the equation. So this equation is what we're going to use on all of our next examples. The first example set says, what is the standard equation of each circle? And it gives you the center and the radius. For number 1, the center is at 5 comma negative 2. So your 5 is your h value and negative 2 is your k value. And then it tells you that the radius is 7. So if we substitute these values into this equation, make sure you pay close attention to the signs. Standard form is x minus h, so x minus 5 in parentheses squared plus y minus our k value is negative 2 in parentheses squared. This is going to be equal to the radius of 7 squared. Before I move on, I just want to clean this expression up because when you're subtracting a negative, it's the same as adding. We end up with x minus 5 in parentheses squared plus y plus 2 in parentheses squared, and this is equal to 49. 7 squared is 49. This is the equation of the circle. So if you were to graph a circle, you would be graphing it from this equation here. Our next example has a center at 3 comma 5, h value 3, k value 5, and a radius of 6. When I substitute this into the formula, we have x minus 3 in parentheses squared plus y minus k, which is 5 in parentheses squared, and this is equal to 6 squared, or the radius squared. We clean this up for our final answer of x minus 3 in parentheses squared, y minus 5 in parentheses squared, and this is equal to 36. The next set of questions is a little bit more difficult because we are given the center and also a point. So if I scroll out and zoom or look back at my equation here, or my circle here, we have the center point and we have a point on the circle in the next example. So what we need to do is we need to solve, or we need to find the length of the radius in order to fill in the equation of the circle. So number 1 says, what is the standard equation of the circle with a center at 1, -3 that passes through the point 2, 2? So we're going to bring back some prior knowledge here, and we're going to bring back using the distance formula. So the first step to solving an equation like this is going to be use the distance formula to calculate the length of the radius. The distance formula, if anyone has forgot what that is going to be the radius is equal to the square root. We have x2 minus x sub 1 in parentheses squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 in parentheses squared. And we need to substitute our points into this equation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use the center, which is 1, -3, and I'm going to use the extra point, or the point on the circle, which is 2, 2. I am going to label 1, -3 as x sub 1, y sub 1, and I'm going to label the second point x sub 2, y sub 2. And these are the points I'm going to use or substitute into the equation. So when I substitute these values in, I have the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1. X sub 2 is 2. X sub 1 is 1. 2 minus 1 squared. Plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1. 2 minus -3. I'm going to simplify this. My first expression, 2 minus 1 in parentheses squared, is 1 squared. This second expression, 2 minus -3, or 2 plus 3, that's going to be 5 squared. This simplifies to the square root of 1 plus 25. And 1 plus 25 gives us the radius of the square root of 26. And this is the answer, or the step 1 value, which is your radius. So once we find the radius, once we solve for step 1, step 2 is going to be to use the radius and the center of the circle to write the equation of the circle. All right, so taking our previous information, we know from step 1 that the radius is equal to the square root of 26. And we know that the center is at 1, -3. So I'm filling in the equation that we learned at the top of this note sheet, which is x minus h in parentheses squared plus y minus k in parentheses squared is equal to r squared. And I'm using this information to fill in that equation. So when I substitute in my values, I have x minus 1 squared plus y minus negative 3 squared is equal to the square root of 26 squared. And put the square root of 26 in parentheses. When you're squaring a square root, think of something basic. Think of when you square the square root of 2. This is equal to the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. That equals the square root of 4, which simplifies to 2. 2 is your solution, and 2 was what was underneath the radical to begin with. So when we simplify our equation right here, when we have the square root of 26 squared, that is going to simplify to just 26. Our final answer is x minus 1 in parentheses squared plus y plus 3. We're subtracting a negative, so plus 3 squared. And this is equal to the square root of 26 squared, which is 26. That is your final answer. I know it's a little crammed in here on my note sheet, but that is what you are doing. That's your final answer. Okay, I want everyone to do number 2 by yourself. It is the same exact type of problem as this one we just went over. So you're going to start by completing step 1. Step 1 is to use the distance formula and to calculate the length of the radius. Once you find the length of the radius, you are going to complete this problem using step 2, which is to use the radius and the center to write the equation of a circle. So press pause on your video, come back to the video to check your answer. For the next example set, we need to find the center and the radius of the circle, and then graph the circle. So remember that the center is identified by h and k. Also remember that the standard form equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared. So if I take this equation, I need to make sure my signs are correct. In order to get the standard form of subtraction in the first expression, this is technically x minus negative 4 in parentheses squared plus y minus 1, oops, I forgot to write 1 in the step above, y minus 1 in parentheses squared. And if if the answer is the radius squared, we need to take the square root of 25 in order to find our value of r. So our r value is 5. 5 squared gives us 25. So check this out. It's the biggest mistake students make is they just look right at that number and they say that 25 is the radius, but that is not true. The answer to the equation is the radius squared. So what number squared gives you 25? And that would be 5. So from here, I can see that my h value is negative 4. My k value is 1. And my radius, or my r value, is 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the circle and I'm going to plot a point for the center of the circle at negative 4, 1. And I'm actually going to increase by units of 2 in order to fit everything on this graph. So negative 4, 1 is located here. And then I'm going to count the radius. You're going to count directly up, so think north, south, east, west. You cannot count on a diagonal. So if we're counting 5 units, we have this radius, which is a length of 5. We have a radius here, length of 5. We have here, length of 5. And we have here, length of 5. So I'm going to draw a circle. It does not have to be perfect. I know my thing automatically creates a perfect circle, but yours does not have to be perfect. This is what you are graphing. You are finding the radius, you are finding the center, and you are graphing a circle in the coordinate plane. This right here would be your final answer. And that is how you use the equation of a circle to graph a circle. The next example set is identifying the radius in the center from an equation. Now, these equations are not in the form of the equation of a circle, which means you have to do that. And this is actually quite a process to do. Now, we use completing the square, which is something you learned in Algebra 1. Because of COVID, I'm not sure that you learned completing the square in Algebra 1. So here's the directions, and I'm going to go through an example of how to do it. So the first step is to, or before we start, I should say, you're looking at an equation such as x squared plus bx. So I'm going to complete one of these as we go. I'm going to complete an example as I read through this. X squared plus bx could be something such as x squared plus 8x. The first step is to find 1/2 of your b value. Well, in this case, your b value is 8. So if we find half of that, it would be 8 divided by 2, which is equal to 4. That is half of your b value. Step 2 says to square the result from step 1. So we're going to take 4. And we are going to square this value, leaving us with 16. Once you find that, step 3 is to add the result from step 2 to both sides of the equation. In this case, we only have one side. We don't have an equal sign. So I'm going to write this as x squared plus 8x. That was what I started with. And now I am adding 16. You're adding what we call completing the square. So this is what you do when you complete the square. Now we need to take this and we need to apply it to this equation because we need to convert this to the equation of a circle in order to answer these questions. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to take these terms and I'm going to group together my x values and group together my y values. So what I mean by that is take x squared and negative 4x, and we're going to write those two terms in parentheses. X squared minus 4x. Then we have y squared plus 10y. And there's a plus sign in between them because technically I don't need these parentheses. I am going to subtract 20 from both sides so that my constant term is by itself. Again, I have addition and subtraction between all of these terms because I technically do not need these parentheses. These parentheses are completely optional, although they will help us organize our problem. So not only did we group the x and y values, we also isolated the constant term, which is this number. Okay, so once you get to this step, you need to complete the square for both sets of parentheses. So that means I'm going to take this first set. I'm going to take negative 4, that's my b value. Make sure you include that negative sign. Negative 4 divided by 2 leaves you with negative 2. Negative 2 squared is equal to 4. For the second set of parentheses, I'm going to take 10. We're going to divide 10 by 2. That gives us 5. We square that value. That gives us 25. Now this is where step 3 is imperative because step 3 says to add the result from step 2 to both sides of the equation. So in this first set of parentheses, I'm going to write x squared minus 4x. And then I have this number here, so plus 4, close parentheses. Plus, in parentheses, y squared plus 10y. And then I have plus 25, which is this number here. Close parentheses. On the other side of the equal sign, I have negative 20, but I also need to add 4 and add 25 because what I did on one side has to be done on the other. So right here I added 4, so right here I'm going to add 4. Right here I added 25, so here I'm adding 25. Once you're at this step, you need to simplify and you need to factor each side. So right here you need to factor what's in parentheses. You have to think to yourself what two factors multiply to positive 4 and the same two factors that add to negative 4. And just a hint, it's going to be this number every time. So I can write this expression, and I have to write this expression as x, and then right here, minus 2 in parentheses squared, plus the second set of parentheses, I need the number that multiplies to 25 and adds to 10. It's going to be this number here. So my second set of parentheses is going to be y plus 5 in parentheses squared. On the right side of the equal sign, when I add these three terms together, I have negative 20 plus 4 plus 25. That's going to give me 9. So based on everything else we've done on this worksheet, remember that your h and your k value, just make sure you have your correct sign, and your r value are found in that order. So the center, including the correct signs here, are going to be positive 2, and then right there is negative 5. And if the radius squared is 9, that means your r value is 3. Now I know this is a lot of work on this type of problem, so for the next problem what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through it slowly. I'm not going to talk so you can just watch and slowly copy down what I'm doing, but please make sure you fully understand this type of problem, and if you have questions, make sure you ask me before the quiz tomorrow. If you have any other questions, let me know, and again, please follow along as I complete this next problem.